This video goes out to my friend Styx. Dude, you made an addict out of me, man. I'm not like super proficient at it, but I love this thing. I love flying that thing. If I'd have known RC piloting was as much fun, I thought, okay, I'm going to get this thing. One of the things I got this for, I traded him a reasonably decent 22 caliber air rifle for that. The reason I got it was to help deal with Psycho. I wanted to be able to send it up, do a security sweep of the property with the little camera, just fly it in a loop and look down the right of way, different places where my regular cameras can't touch, and just do a reconnaissance, which I'm getting better at flying with it. You wouldn't know it by that last video, but I've pretty much mastered hovering now. And but no, man, that thing is fun to fly. I love flying that thing. It's not the most stable. There's a lot of them out there that are more stable. Let me get this where I can hold the camera, and I'll show you what this is. Oh, it's backwards. Well, that kind of sucks. Okay. This is what it is. This is the Syma X5, X5c revision 1. Supposedly this is more stable than the first one. And even with the prop guards on it and everything, it flies pretty good once you get the hang of the throttle, man. Getting the throttle. I found out the reason I was having so much trouble holding altitude where it was doing this all the time on that last video is because when the wind comes out of the north, there's a row of trees over there where I've been practicing. Let me put that back up real fast. There's a row of trees back there where I've been practicing. And when the wind comes out of the north, let me put him where he'll sit right. I don't want him to fall off. There we go. There's a row of trees there along the south side, and what happens is I was having 5 to 7 mile an hour gusts. As that north wind was hitting those trees, it was being diverted downward. That's why when you see I'll get some height and then all of a sudden it'll go like that. Yeah, that was that wind downdrafting. And the way I figured it out, I made a small glider out of paper and I threw it around out there just to see, what was going on. And when it would get near, it would fly in a straight line, but then when the wind would pick up and it get near those trees, it would almost crash, nosedive. So there's a downdraft over there. So it was causing me to lose altitude, and it's causing me to have to really, really crank on the throttle to get it to go back up. But also I was dealing with an effect called vortex ring. How the hell do they say it? Basically what happens, if you descend too fast with a quadcopter, as your quadcopter is flying up above, you have clean, undisturbed air being sucked in, and that's what holds you aloft. It's not the pushing down that holds you aloft. It's the lift created by the rotors as they're digging into that clean, they're sucking in on that clean, undisturbed air on top. But what happens is you've got turbulent air below. You've got prop wash. And if you descend too fast, it'll form a vortex around the propeller and it'll suck it back in at the top, and at that point you lose all lift. And this happens with real helicopters too. There's been quite a few helicopter crashes caused by that. But that's ring vortex effect, or vortex ring effect, I think is what they call that. But when that happens, down she goes. And no matter how much power you apply to the stick, she's going to, unless you do something, she's going to go straight down to the ground and plunk onto the ground. And that's the end of your flight, until you can lift off again. And so the way you get out of that, the way I figured out that you can get out of that, when you first notice that it's happening and you start to lose control, pitch forward as hard as you can, or pitch to the left or pitch to the right, and bring the throttle up. If you can slide out of that vortex, if your copter's got enough power to push you out of that vortex, you'll break free and the copter will begin to rise again, and then you can stabilize the craft. That's one way you can do it. There's other ways, but that's the easiest way I've found, and it seems to work much of the time. In a lot of that video where it goes down real fast and then it comes back up, I slid out, is what I did. I slid out of that. And for the longest time, I could not figure out what the heck was going on. I thought the machine might have had a problem with it. And it was another instructor I saw on YouTube that taught me that. So, yeah. And I've only been flying now, God, what has it been now? About 4 days? 4 or 5 days. No, about 4. But I've been flying every day. Every time I get a charge on that battery, she goes up. It's the only day I haven't been because they're forecasting rain. But I love flying. I love flying that. Now, I'm not so good at it at distance because, you know, I have albinism, so my vision is very nearsighted. So I have to keep it close to me. But I have run an FPV setup. I tried it. I actually used the simulator, and on the simulator that I downloaded, I have the same problem with line of sight. When it gets too far out there, you know, I can't see what... I can see generally where it's at and what it's doing, but I can't see this. You know, the small details. But what I found is, when I put it in FPV mode and leave the controls free, I can fly that thing. I can fly it anywhere I need to fly it. Because when you're in FPV mode, you know, as your craft, especially if you have a fixed camera, you know, your craft, it's going to do things as you fly it. And you can see those subtle movements, and you can see the ground coming up to meet you or going away, and you can see the proximity to objects. So, yeah. But I did find out that flying in FPV, I don't like wide-angle cameras. I absolutely hate them. I like a standard angle camera that gives you as close to your own human eyes perspective. I seem to do better with that. It makes things look closer than they actually are, and that's good in a way. Because one of the things I hated about wide-angle cameras is stuff looks far away, and as you're getting close to it, all of a sudden, whoop, yeah, and you're banging into it right then, you know. That's the downside to wide-angle lenses. And one of the things I noticed, early FPV flights, you see some of the FPV recordings from back when it was new, you know, and everybody wasn't doing it, it hadn't become the trendy thing yet. A lot of those early FPV machines that they were flying had standard cameras. They didn't have wide angle on them. I don't know why it is that it's migrating that way. I guess if you play Quake and you like that kind of thing, you know, where you can open up your point of view, that's good. But, you know, if you have good spatial orientation skills, which I actually surprisingly have pretty good spatial orientation skills because I have to compensate for this. So flying with a normal angle lens is not a problem for me. But if I'd have known how much fun flying these things was, I'd have been doing this since I was a kid, man. I'd have like $300 and $400 RC rigs, you know, gliders. I actually like the quad better than any glider I ever flew or any kind of RC plane I've ever seen. You know, the only thing I found that's a big pain is learning to use the rudder on a quad, man. They put the rudder, okay, on this side, well, facing you it would be on this side. It's on the left stick. They put the throttle there, but then they put the rudder there. So you have to move your thumb forward and back to, you know, to get the throttle, but then you have to move your thumb side to side to get the rudder. I'd much rather have a preset amount of torque for the rudder that you can set how hard you want it to turn, and have it on either triggers down at the base of the control or on the buttons at the top, where you've got this finger free, you know. But this, if you've ever used an iPod or an iPhone Touch, have you ever been able to sweep a straight line left to right across the screen with your thumb on the thing? You know? What happens, inevitably, you use the rudder, your throttle either goes up or down. You know, you can't sweep a perfect horizontal line to hold your throttle. So your copter, when you start turning, or, you know, and it gets out of your control range, out of your eye, well, for me, it gets out of my visible range, because they can run away on you, man, when you do that. So you gotta, the way I figured out to do it is I just dab that rudder, or, you know, because I don't want it going like that or like that. And I'm already, I haven't learned it yet fully. I'm getting the hang of it. But holding that throttle constant, man, or getting that throttle where, when you get it in that sweet spot where you can hold altitude, any little thing can knock it out. And I don't like that. So having the rudder up on the triggers on the controller, the buttons on the front, it's kind of like a PlayStation pad. The controller that comes with it. I'll show you. Let me get it real quick. I think it's over here. No, where'd I put that thing? I had to move it out of the way. Well, where did I put it? Well, that's crappy. I guess I'm going to be hunting for something. No, it's in plain sight. I don't see it right now. Oh, I know where it is. It's over here. Let me get it real fast. Okay. This is your controller. And I'm having to one-hand this, but as you can see on the top, there's a button left and right. Rather than have this be your flight mode, and this be a flip, which is the most useless move on a quadcopter when you're carrying a camera anyway, why not put the yaw control on these buttons? Because you can take your finger, when you're flying, of course I don't have both hands on it right now, but see, your finger just rests there, and you can mash that, and you can still maintain your throttle. So, instead of this is what you normally have to do, is you have to, okay, here's your throttle, and then you have to, and it's spring-loaded, so it always returns to center, but you have to do this while you're maintaining your throttle, and there is just absolutely no way to drag a horizontal line on that. There is no way. What I would do there, I don't know what I would assign to that left and right, but I mean, I'll get used to it. I'm using it now and I'm starting to break into it, but really, why not just predefine a rate of turn for the rudder and put it up on here? You got a free finger there, and it doesn't interfere with the joysticks. So just a way to improve the efficiency of the controller. If you need all that mode 1, mode 2, flip and all that crap, pre-configure it before you fly. Why not put that, why not add an extra button to the controller for that? I'm not going to switch to mode 2 on the fly. I'm going to set it for the flying conditions I have. I like stabilized flight when I'm using a camera. And if I take the camera off, I'll put it into a more aggressive mode, or if it's windy, but you're pretty much going to fly how you set it, So yeah, it's a inefficient design in that regard. But people have gotten used to using it that way, so I guess that's how you have to use it. But learned a lot in just 3 days. I've learned a lot about flying these things. One of the things I discovered even before I heard an instructor talk about it, down close to the surface of the ground, when you first launch off, there's one guy who says, oh, that's bad air, you don't want to float around there, you want to get up above that bad air. Not necessarily. It's kind of fun flying the bad air, because what you got down there, you have what's called in-ground effect. When the craft is just a little ways above the ground, it's right on a cushion of air. It's using thrust to hold it up, and it creates a cushion of compressed air, slightly compressed air below it, because the density raises because of the pressure being put down on it by the props. So your craft actually uses less battery power and will float along the ground like an air hockey puck. And you can kind of fly low or cut the grass. I did a lot of grass cutting unintentionally on that video, but it'll sit there and it'll ride, and you don't need as much throttle to hold it there, and you can just float like a hovercraft. And then if you need to get up in the air, you just increase the throttle and go on up, and that changes your flight dynamics. The other thing I found out is just hovering and moving very slowly eats up your battery. The thing will actually use less battery if you're in some kind of motion, because when you're in motion, when you transition to motion, you start generating lift on the upper body of the craft. You don't have to move fast, but every little bit helps. I've lengthened my flight times by moving the craft around a little bit rather than holding it in a blind hover. That being said, the first thing you should teach yourself, and this is something I also figured out, don't go out and just try to fly across half the world the first run out of the box. Go find you a grassy field or somewhere soft that when your craft comes down unintentionally, or if you have to cut the throttle to avoid a crash, what you want is to practice hovering, control of the craft. That's the first thing you should learn. And then after you've mastered the ability to hover and hold your altitude, then start doing motions, this way and this way, bring it back, try to do circles, adjust your altitude up or down. But, just slowly work your way into it. Nobody out there, and I can attest to this, nobody out there is a super pilot right out of the box, even with a stabilized craft. Stability just means it's going to level off when you take your hand off the stick, or when you center the stick. It's going to level off after you do your inputs. Stability doesn't mean it's going to stay put. It's going to slide. So you're going to have to constantly be correcting it. The best thing I can equate to it, it's like pushing a bar of soap around on a wet floor. You're going to constantly have to make corrections because it slides, and any little wind will push it. So you got to always have your finger on those controls over there on the right to control which way it's pitched. Excuse me, something is really irritating my nose this morning. But that's the first thing. Learn to use the attitude control, the pitch on the right to move around first. And once you've got it where you can slide it around pretty good, you can hold it where you want, then start playing with your rudder. That's what I'm doing now. I'm starting to just edge into using my rudder. And I would rather actually pirouette the thing. I'd fly it over to where it is and then point it where I want it, because I'm using it for surveillance. I'm not flying a race with it or anything like that. I'm basically putting the craft into position, and then I'm pointing the camera, and I'm just taking reconnaissance. And then I turn it around and I come back, The other thing I discovered is always be aware of the orientation of your craft, because it gets weird. If it turns sideways, all your controls are goobered up and you don't know if it's coming or going, man. It'll freak you out. And I'm just now beginning to get used to that. Oh, the sun's coming up. So I got a little sun in the window over there. But you just wouldn't believe how many times I've crashed that thing. Or almost crashed it. I don't really have crashes. I have throttle cuts to avoid crashes. I'm over grass, so I don't care. It lands nicely in soft grass. But when it starts getting too close to trees or whatever, I cut the throttle. And I drop it. I don't fly it high, so it doesn't matter right now. I'm doing low flights. But like when it comes up under a tree branch, I'll ease off the throttle and bring it down and slide it over. But like if it's heading for the chain link fence, or it's heading for the, whatever is standing out there, if I can't get it corrected, I cut throttle immediately. And that's the other thing that they tell you, and this is very important. Those little motors on those things, they have a lifespan. They're not indefinite. It's not like other toys. They have a lifespan rated in thousands of hours, or even hundreds of hours for some. So if you get in a situation where you crash and the rotor's not turning, come off the throttle immediately when you crash. Because if you don't, that motor's sitting there trying to turn, and that little coil in that motor is getting red hot trying to turn that thing. It draws a lot of power, and it takes a lot of power to keep that in the air. And basically, when your motor is stopped pushing against a blade of grass or a rock or something, your motor basically becomes a light bulb filament, and it's pulling gads of power out of that little LiPo battery. So your motor is going to die. It's either going to be, that's going to be a point of failure, or the FET transistors in the controller in the center of that thing that control the speed of the motor are going to burn up. So always, always, if you have to forcibly land or you have to crash, cut the throttle immediately. Don't let that thing sit there and push. That's one of the things I learned from an instructor as well. You can burn up your flight controller by trying to do that, or you can burn your motor up. So I've seen people try to take them back up after they crash, and there's like a rotor caught and the motor's sitting there trying to push on it. No, don't do that, because you're shortening the life of your motor immensely by doing that. There's some science behind it. It's a unique kind of DC motor that is, and it draws a lot of power and it makes a lot of heat. So if it ain't flying and there's not air moving over that motor, you don't need to be trying to force that to run, you know. Just walk over there, pick it up, put it back on its launch pad and go again. You know, that's what I do. So I'm glad I learned that right out of the get-go, because I would have destroyed it by now trying to force it up, you know. So anyway, great thing. Styx, I appreciate that a whole hell of a lot. One of the other things I did, and he had said something about this, if you get this particular one, this is the x5c, it has these little covers on the bottom of it down here that cover the LEDs up. I just took them off. There was one cover on this thing kept falling off, and luckily it was fluorescent orange colored, so it was relatively easy to find whenever it would I put him right there. There you go, buddy. It's relatively easy to find when it fell off. But I just got tired of it. I knew I was going to lose it sooner or later, and I didn't want to put super glue on the aircraft body or anything like that. So I just took them off. You know, what does it hurt? They're LEDs. What's going to happen? You know, if anything, they're more solid state than the covers that were on them. And that also, now this is very interesting. They didn't seem that heavy in my hand when I took them off. You know, they just seemed like a leaf or something. You know, there wasn't much weight to them. I put them in the drawer and I took the thing back up. It actually flies better with them off. I don't know why. It's not that much weight, but I guess every little bit counts. But I took them off. I can see the LEDs much better with them off too. They're much brighter with those covers off, and you can actually see them in the daylight a lot better, so you don't lose orientation of your craft when it's above your head. And that being said, all in all, it's a good craft. It's a good trainer, and that's what I'm kind of using it for. I don't film every flight. Sometimes I take the camera off and I fly without it, because it's good to learn in a varying set of conditions. But all in all, pretty good flyer. You know, I'm more satisfied with it than my own flying skills, I'll put it that way. Once you get it trimmed out, it hovers pretty good. But yeah, I appreciate that, Styx. And I'm going to send some video your way. I found a really good instructor who has some YouTube stuff, and I'm going to send you some links to that. He has a good basics course in how to fly those without crashing them. And even though I'd been flying a little while, he had a lot of stuff that helped me out. Excuse me. I just ate, and that's rough. Don't know why. But anyway, I'm going to go out and fly. As soon as I can find myself a little bit better place to fly than where I've been putting it up in the air. I know the video is a little mundane, but I figure I'm running the camera anyway, so I'm just going to film everything when I fly, and if something comes out looking good, I'll post it. If it's a bunch of crap, I'll just, you know, delete it and get rid of it. You know, who wants to see me crashing a plane over and over and over again, you know? And I've had to do throttle cuts and hard land them. Like I said, I've only had 1 or 2 crashes, and that was my own stupidity for being distracted. But I would say to anybody, that craft there, you can get that anywhere from $60 down to about 40. I mean, Banggood has deals on them all the time. Banggood.com. BANGGOOD.com. You want a quad rotor flyer, there's where you can get it, and you won't have to break the bank. In fact, I'm probably going to get my first FPV craft from there. So, we'll see. I've got my eye on a couple of them in the $100 range. And I'm also looking at some Fat Shark goggles, which those are cool. You can get the goggles, the camera rig with the transmitter, the whole 9 yards. They've got a setup, I think it's for like $230. It'll get you into FPV on anything you can mount that camera on. So, I don't know. I'm either going to do the all-in-one package, or I'm going to go the route of the Fat Shark goggles and get me a quad that I know can carry the camera with some real time. That's the only other thing. 7 minutes. I wish I had more flight time, man. I wish I had more flight time. I'd learn much faster if I had more flight time, but then again, it'd be a lot harder on the motors to fly that long, without a interruption. So, I'm not quite there to keeping it in the air for 7 minutes anyway. I'm still learning. But when you're having that much fun, it really hurts when the fun ends, So, I guess I'll catch y'all later. Y'all have a good day, YouTube. And again, Styx, thanks a lot. Now that you've got your new quad, if you haven't heard it by now, bring it down. We'll fly them together. I'll show you some tricks. I'll show you some things that'll help you fly. Apparently the one he got is like a 21-inch quad, and he says it's much more stable than this one is. And but he said the only thing he didn't like about it was the body's made out of a kind of a foam. But then I started thinking about it, I was like, well, if you make it bigger, you gotta get rid of some of the weight somehow. So you go from plastic to foam, Which it's so light, it probably wouldn't hurt it to just take a vertical descent, Foam is just foam. Land in the grass, it's not gonna hurt anything. I wouldn't go crashing it into walls or smashing it into hard concrete or asphalt, but that's the thing. The first thing you got to learn is how to descend gently, or hover close to the ground while you're training, so that when you cut the throttle, it just goes, Anyway, that's it. I'm sorry, you guys. I've lasted so long, but this is a new thing, and it's very interesting, and it's very fun. It's very fun. Have a good one.